Hey, yo, peace, peace. This your man, Judge, man, coming right back at you, man, with some of that real talk real fast, man. Hey, man, look, I really thought I was done with all studying all this black history stuff, but I guess I'm not. You know what I'm saying? Because something in my blood is telling me to pull my ancestors up, and I'm getting real close. I'm building, this is the foundation, so I want to have an understanding. I want to have an understanding of who and what I am. Because and you should do the same thing, but let me keep it 100 with you. If you don't have your economics in order, you ain't got time to be studying this here. You need to be studying doggone finances. If you ain't got your spiritual game tight, you know what I'm saying? You don't need to be studying this. You need to be studying metaphysics and knowledge and having knowledge of self. But if you do have the time, you want to get into this here because these are the receipts of who and what we are in America. Now, don't get it twisted. Every doggone black person in America has some kind of African blood in their DNA. But your African blood may not be dominant. That's why when the time came out and people was wearing dashikis and they was into all that African black stuff, or back to Africa movement and all that stuff, and you just didn't feel it. And the reason why you didn't feel it is because the African part of your blood wasn't dominant. Maybe the doggone the European uh, royal part of your blood is dominant. Now sit back and think back to the 60s and the 70s and think about your grandparents. Not just your grandparents, think about there were certain people who was in the church and they looked like royalty with the hats and all that stuff. They just naturally had that. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what they were. Because the black royalty, they came over to the Americas a long time ago. Now, what was going on is that we had an empire set up that existed in Asia at the time. That's why they said at one point they tell you often if you've been around they say at one point the whole world was known as Asia because that's where the empire was. The last empire was in Asia under the old world order, and we knew all the places that produced the gold, the silver, the diamonds, the doggone marble, the fine wood, the fruits and vegetables. We knew where all that stuff was, and we sent people up there to set up governments all around the doggone world. And those governments around the world, they were to regulate all of the doggone the cotton, whatever merchandise was coming out of whatever area and parts of the world. The money, a portion of that money, went to the empire. See now the empire, they would run across these doggone lands because they were dominant, and they would be like, okay, I tell you what, you know what I'm saying? They go down to South America, a spot that's known where they were collecting a not oysters but pearls. So they would go down there and they'd be like, "You all right?" They come down there with their army. They said, "Look here. Now you go ahead and continue doing what you're doing, running your business. Just give us a small piece of land, that little 50 acres over there, and in return, we will teach you about modern living. We will teach your children, we will educate your children because education meant everything." And they said, we can't make them kings and queens, but we will make them dukes. So we made them we offered them to be a part of the empire. And now, not only did we offer the farmers to be a part of the empire and the merchants who were the ones who were getting the pearls to be a part of the empire, I'm just using this for an example, or the gold or wherever they would go, they would become part of the empire, and the doggone tribes that was around them, maybe the little indigenous tribes who had warring tribes, we would make them part of the empire just for their warriors. So if anybody in the empire decided to act a doggone fool, well, if anybody in one of the kingdoms on one of the spots that we had around the world started to act a doggone fool, we ran the empire, and the empire ran all the world armies. So we would sick the doggone indigenous people on the palace. And then sometimes, man, these soldiers, man, that we had and warriors, sometimes they were barbarians. Yeah, those people who you look like cave people, who were filthy and dirty, we had them as part of our warring crew sometimes. And to take it a step further, America was set up to be a warring nation. That's why people be like, why is America always in somebody else's business? Part of that is because of money, and part of that is because of habit, what we're used to doing. Because the empire set America up to be the head warring nation, and they would send us to other parts of the world to check other people when they weren't doing right. But the empire got too greedy, and they was taxing the people too doggone hard, and the people turned on the doggone empire. And so then we started having wars within ourselves. The empire was like, no, you're not gonna turn on me, so let me send this army over there. So and then they would have their own armies. These kingdoms would have their own armies, and then they would set up the doggone war too. So, well, I'm going to go to war right back with you, and I'm keeping the gold, I'm keeping the diamonds, or I'm keeping the merchandise because these people were merchants. This was about money, and this was about religious persecution. Now here, this book right here, they often speak about, well, hell, in this book right here, they talk about the Huguenots. But let me get back to that. Now, those doggone the empire, like I said, they would offer people positions into the empire, and they would doggone be like, how would I say this? All right, they would offer people positions in the empire, and they would promise to educate the people for trade of whatever they were doing, cotton, whatever. So we built up universities across this whole doggone United States, wherever places where we was kicking it. And see, and this is why, this comes to something that always I always question. Harvard University was built in 1640 something, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 1639, 1640. This always stuck with me. I was like, man, I bet you if you went down into, I used to say to myself, I bet you if you went down into the basement of Harvard and a lot of these old colleges and institutions, you would find doggone pictures of black students. And come to find out, I was right, because it never made any sense to me that how was Harvard built in 1640, and the people who came from wherever they so-called came from on the Plymouth Rock. You know what I'm saying? And that's a whole nother story too. But those people came over here in like 1620 or something. So why would they build a doggone university in 20 years? Why would that be the first thing they would build? And they told us that those weren't educated people who came over there. Which book is it? Which book is it? I believe it's this book. Even in that book right there, it gave a list of the people who came over here on the Mayflower, and those people weren't educational people. They were merchants, and they were doggone just regular people, and they were servants. Those people, they weren't, you know what I'm saying? Why would they build a college? No, that's just something I was just dealing with right there, something I'll be dealing with. What I'm saying is that if you go to Harvard and you look at that doggone school, you can see where they cut off certain things and remove certain things, you know what I'm saying, so people won't know who originally set that school up. And I mean, and you believe me, I'm not trying to set up any uh, division between blacks and whites, because they lied to everybody. We got a bunch of white brothers and sisters who know absolutely nothing about their true history, and the history that they hold on to is a lie. And now they're starting to find out that the history that they've been taught is a lie, and it's fucking them up mentally. Sorry for cussing, mom, but it's messing them up. It ain't right. You can never be your best if you can't be 100% who you are. But man, yeah, man, they ran a game on us, man. Man, this book in the center, man, it's real interesting because it talks about the fall of the Moors in Spain. And the people knew that the fall was coming, so what they were doing was they were sending their money, and some of them were sending their money up to France, to the good King Henry, who was known as a Huguenot. Now, the good King Henry would keep their money, and then when the stuff started hitting the fan and and Spain started tripping, they was like, okay, I tell you what, now either you Moors bow down and you accept this new Roman Catholic form of religion, or we're gonna kill you and take your wealth, or we're gonna kick you out and take your wealth, or we're gonna give you the option to where you could just leave with your wealth. And many of them left with their wealth. Many of them stayed and converted over to doggone Roman Catholic religion. You know what I'm saying? And some of them just left. And when they left, they had already had their money set up. Some of them, they were sent money over here to the Americas, and they came over here. Some of us went to doggone. We went as far as going back to India. You know what I'm saying? We just left, man. We couldn't take it. But eventually, the people who left and went to France and still with the good King Henry at that time, as time went by, because they was there for almost 200 years, as time went by, France turned on them. So by the late 1600s and the 1700s, they started coming over to America because of religious persecution. Between the late 1600s and the early 1700s, we started migrating over here to the Americas. Now you often hear stories about uh about your bloodline coming from Ireland, your people being Dutch, your people being Scottish or Irish. A lot of that is because they were black Scottish and black Irish. Because a lot of that because when they got ran out of Spain, like I said, they migrated to these other places, man, and they had other kingdoms that were set up in Ireland and stuff. You have a whole doggone lineage of black kings and queens in Ireland and Scotland and all those places. But eventually, those people, they turned on us too, because we started going to war against ourselves, because the empire started to fall apart because of the greed of the empire. See, America, like I said, I think I said this before, America was set up to be a warring nation. And this was like the last threshold, and it's starting to fall apart. We were merchants everywhere we went. The people who went up to France, and after they left France, because they of religious persecution, and they became known as Huguenots, as King Henry was a Huguenot, which was like another way of being a Protestant. You know, they weren't they might front like they was Roman Catholic, but when they go home they were something else. But those people who left France, who were merchants and educators, and they were bankers, they left and they came to South Carolina. Now, South Carolina had one of the first farmers' banks recorded in history. That farmers' bank that existed in South Carolina, free black slave masters in South Carolina, 1790 to 1860. Those doggone that farmers' bank that was in South Carolina back in the days, it was ran by a Moor or Morenos. You know what I'm saying? They came when the other people wanted to take over the whole situation and flip it over. They came. They kidnapped that guy. They kept him in the bank. They kept him in a basement for 3 days and tortured him until he taught them how to operate the farmers' bank. And then once they learned, they took it over. And then those people became known as, to this day. Man, it's so much that was going on in history, man. It ain't funny. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, we was promising to educate the people, so we set up university. We was promising to educate the children, so we set up universities so we can give them a modern way of living and bring them up into society. But like I said, everything started to fall apart. And in the midst of us warring with one another in different parts of the world, a world war, someone else, our servants who was observing us the whole time and who we taught how to do what we was doing, they moved in and took over. And someone erased our names out of history, and they hid our books. They hid our history. you say, well, how could they hide your history, El Judge? They hide your history because, not because, the fact of the matter is that a lot of you are just now seeing these damn books. This was hidden from you. A lot of those pictures of your family members, and you see Dutch people and they look like they white. They weren't white. They were black people. They might have looked, they might have had a look like they was mixed because we the black man, he loves mixing his blood with other women. That's how we did. We've always been on that. That's part of our downfall, but it is what it is. If it wasn't for that beautiful mixture of different bloods, we wouldn't have all these different beautiful people on this planet. But yeah, man, it's real interesting, man, and the things that's going on that happened to us here in America. A lot of this stuff we've done to ourselves, but the receipts are starting to pop up. You know what I'm saying? And when I'm 57 years old, I always heard the stories. They used to always tell me, it was a black man who taught the white people how to break a slave. And then the story was, it was the Moors who started slavery and showed the white people how to do it. But now the truth is really coming out. We was getting bits and pieces of it, but the receipts are starting to show up. We was part of a empire. We ran the original covenant or the Confederate. That's why the 83rd Psalm says that we would never let them raise a confederacy again. This is a war of power because they don't want us to get control of the world again. Because a lot of people, their egos simply can't take it, and various other reasons, you know what I'm saying? Because we'll try to bring righteousness back to the world, but a lot of us, man, toward the end, we became deviants. And it is what it is. And to my people out there who be talking about they want to get reparations for slavery, I mean, who's to pay for it? Especially when it was, man, numerous accounts, a large number of black people who owned slaves. Like I said, we was already over here in this country, and we was already had everything set up. We had the whole world set up. The whole world. We had a one world government over this whole planet, and we was running it. It fell apart. And now what we are seeing is they're trying to build another confederacy. They're trying to create their own version of what we had. And they're still trying. But anyway, man, like I said, man, if you ain't got your stuff together, man, if you ain't got your finances together, you need to be studying economics. If you ain't got your spiritual affairs together, you need to be studying knowledge of self. But if you have the time and you got your things in order and you can study this stuff here, these good old books, go to it. Anyway, man, this is your man, El Judge. Peace and blessings. My black ass is out.